I went to fix a washing machine, but staying close to two sisters became the hardest job of all. The phone rang just as I was finishing breakfast, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet hum of my small apartment. I frowned at the unknown number, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, made me answer. Hello? Yes, I can come by today, I said, listening carefully as a woman's calm voice explained the problem. The washing machine was broken again, and she needed someone reliable to fix it. There was something in her tone, polite, confident, but with a subtle undercurrent of worry, that made me nod even before she'd finished. By the time I arrived at the house, the afternoon sunlight had softened, spilling gold across a modest but well-kept kitchen. The washing machine sat in the corner like an unassuming sentinel, humming faintly with residual electricity, its door slightly ajar. The smell of lavender detergent lingered in the air, mingling with the warm scent of freshly baked bread, suggesting someone who cared about the small comforts of home. The first woman met me at the door. She was in her early 40s, with a quiet grace in the way she moved, each step measured but effortless. Her hair caught the sunlight, falling softly over her shoulders, and the faint lines around her eyes spoke of experience without hardening her warmth. She smiled politely, offering a handshake, but instead of the typical brief clasp, her fingers lingered just a fraction longer, and I felt an odd, grounding steadiness in her touch. I'm so glad you could come, she said. Her voice was steady, yet there was a flicker of vulnerability I couldn't ignore. I followed her into the kitchen, kneeling beside the machine, tools in hand. As I inspected the wiring, she leaned over my shoulder to look. The heat of her presence was tangible, almost magnetic. Our shoulders brushed lightly. A spark of something unspoken passed between us, subtle but undeniable. I quickly glanced up, catching her eyes for a moment too long, and felt a quiet flutter of awareness, a sudden consciousness of the space we shared. Then the other sister appeared. Slightly younger, perhaps early 40s as well, she had a playful ease in contrast to her sister's calm precision. She carried a cup of coffee and leaned against the doorway, watching me with a teasing smile. Her presence added another layer of warmth and tension to the room. The way she tilted her head, the gentle curve of her lips when she laughed, the casual way her hand passed near mine as she offered the coffee, made the simple act feel charged. I tried to focus on the washing machine, reminding myself I was here to fix a machine, not navigate the unspoken dynamics of two women who somehow commanded the space entirely without effort. And yet, each glance, each brush of skin, each subtle movement, leaning in, passing tools, laughing softly, wove a quiet intimacy in the room. By the time I had the machine open, I realized the task before me wasn't just a mechanical puzzle of wires and valves. It was also this delicate dance of presence and proximity, of polite closeness that felt like it might stretch into something more. And as I worked, kneeling there with sunlight brushing my back and the soft murmur of two sisters filling the air, I couldn't help but feel that this repair job might change more than just a washing machine. I had barely started adjusting the machine when the second sister stepped into the kitchen, her entrance light and deliberate. She was a little younger, perhaps closer to 40, with a playful confidence that contrasted sharply with the calm elegance of her sister. She held a mug of coffee, the steam curling upward in lazy tendrils, carrying the earthy aroma that seemed to fill the room and settle into my chest with an almost intoxicating warmth. Her eyes flicked toward me with a mix of curiosity and amusement, as if she were silently measuring whether I belonged in their space. "So, you're the miracle worker?" she said lightly, her tone teasing but not mocking. There was a softness in her voice that hinted at curiosity, and I felt the subtle thrill of being evaluated, and perhaps approved, by her. The two sisters had a dynamic that was effortless, fluid. The older one remained close to the machine, standing slightly behind me, her fingers brushing the edge of the countertop as she watched, patient but attentive. The younger sister leaned casually against the doorway, one knee bent, the mug balanced perfectly in her hands, her hair catching the afternoon light in a way that made it seem almost alive. Their proximity was natural, intimate even, but not in a way that demanded explanation. I found myself acutely aware of the small details, the slight bend of the older sister's wrist as she handed me a screwdriver, the warmth of her fingers brushing mine ever so slightly, the younger sister's gaze following every movement I made, eyes bright, amused, curious. Even as I focused on the machine, my awareness of them was unavoidable. "Be careful with that part," the younger sister said with a smile, her tone a mixture of concern and playful challenge. The words were casual, but the way she leaned forward slightly, shoulders almost brushing mine, sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. It was subtle, the kind of intimacy that needed no acknowledgement to be felt, a quiet, electric awareness that thrummed between us. I tried to steady my focus, noting the contrast in their personalities. The older sister exuded a serene patience, her voice calm, measured. The younger one radiated energy, her laughter soft but lively. Both, in their own ways, drew my attention and stirred emotions I wasn't prepared for. Each glance, each fleeting touch, seemed to linger longer than it should. When the older sister handed me a wrench, her hand stayed near mine a moment too long, and I felt the quiet steadiness of her presence pressing gently against my awareness. The sunlight shifted across the room, casting long, soft shadows over the washing machine, over us. The ordinary mechanical task suddenly felt loaded with significance, each movement heightened by the awareness of two women observing, guiding, sharing this small space with me. And in that shared silence, the humming of the machine, the quiet clink of tools, the soft murmur of casual conversation, I realized the day's work was shaping up to be far more than a repair job. For the first time, I caught myself wondering not just about the broken washing machine, but about the way these two women moved, the warmth they carried, the subtle tension they created by simply being near. And I knew, even then, that leaving this kitchen would be harder than I expected. By mid-afternoon, the mechanical hum of the washing machine had become a constant, grounding presence in the kitchen. I was leaning over its open panel, careful hands navigating tangled wires and stubborn screws, but my attention kept drifting to the two women nearby. They weren't just observers anymore. They were companions in the room, their presence both comforting and subtly distracting. The older sister stood beside the counter, arms loosely folded, eyes following each movement of mine. There was a quiet steadiness to her, the way her shoulders relaxed even as she leaned slightly forward, curious but unpressured. I noticed how her fingers traced the edge of the countertop absent-mindedly, the soft flexing of her wrist a small, intimate motion that drew my gaze. Every so often, she would tilt her head, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and I felt an unexpected warmth ripple through my chest. The younger sister had perched herself on a stool nearby, a casual observer with a twinkle of playfulness in her eyes. She asked questions about the machine, technical, practical, but the way she phrased them carried subtle humor and a light teasing that made my fingers falter on a bolt. Her laughter was soft, like warm wine through the room, and I found myself unconsciously matching its rhythm, smiling even as I worked. At one point, the older sister shared a brief personal anecdote, a memory of her first apartment, the washing machine she'd inherited from her mother, the tiny mishaps that had become stories she now laughed about. Her voice softened in the telling, tinged with nostalgia, and I felt an unexpected surge of empathy. There was a vulnerability beneath her calm exterior, and for a fleeting moment, I wished I could reach out and bridge the gap, offer some quiet reassurance. And then, almost imperceptibly, our hands touched. I had handed her a small screwdriver, and our fingers brushed, fleeting, almost accidental, but electric. She didn't pull away. Instead, her palm lingered near mine a moment longer than necessary, a subtle acknowledgement of proximity that left a small warmth trailing up my arm. Even as I focused on the machine, I felt her presence like a tether, a gentle weight that grounded me while simultaneously pulling at my awareness. The younger sister caught my glance and smiled knowingly, a spark of mischief in her eyes. She shifted slightly on the stool, legs brushing against the older sister's in a natural, effortless closeness. I noticed the way their subtle movements, leaning in, tilting heads, brushing shoulders, created a quiet intimacy that included me without ever stating it outright. It was dizzying in its simplicity, the way ordinary gestures could carry unspoken meaning. Time seemed to stretch, measured by the hum of the machine and the cadence of our shared conversation. I realized that this repair job, meant to be mundane, had transformed into something entirely different, a tapestry of small, charged moments. Each laugh, each glance, each brief brush of skin, wove a connection I hadn't expected, one that made the kitchen feel smaller, warmer, and profoundly alive. By the time I finally straightened, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag, I felt a strange reluctance to break the spell. The sisters were no longer just clients or acquaintances. They were companions, their quiet presence filling the room with a tension that was both gentle and persistent, a slow-burning warmth that made me wonder how long this closeness could linger. And in that suspended moment, I realized I wasn't just fixing a washing machine. I was discovering the quiet gravity of two women whose lives had intersected with mine in the most unexpected, magnetic way. By late afternoon, the kitchen felt warmer, more intimate. The sunlight had softened into a gentle glow, spilling across the linoleum floor in golden slants. I was crouched by the washing machine, my hands deep in its panel, trying to coax a stubborn wire into place. The hum of the motor had become almost comforting, a steady rhythm that contrasted with the nervous flutter in my chest every time the sisters moved nearby. The older sister hovered beside me, leaning slightly over my shoulder as I worked. Her presence was steadying, her hand resting lightly on the counter as if to ground herself, or perhaps me. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, subtle, almost floral, lingering near my cheek when she bent closer. Her gaze followed each of my movements, calm but attentive, and for a moment, I felt caught in a quiet, magnetic orbit. The younger sister had shifted to the other side of the room, picking up a small basket of laundry, her fingers brushing against the fabric as she moved. She glanced at me with a mischievous smile, one eyebrow arched, silently challenging me to focus. Her energy was playful, teasing, but there was a warmth beneath it, a softness in the way she observed me, as though each small movement mattered. Then it happened. A spark leapt from the machine, accompanied by a sharp smell of ozone and a startling hiss. My reflexes kicked in before my thoughts could catch up. I reached instinctively for the older sister's arm, steadying her as she gasped softly and stepped back. Her hand felt warm against mine, surprisingly delicate yet firm, a heartbeat brushing against my skin in the pause that followed. The younger sister jumped slightly, her coffee mug wobbling in her hand. I stepped closer to reassure her, my hand brushing her wrist as I steadied the mug. That fleeting contact sent a jolt through me, electric, immediate, but unspoken. Neither sister pulled away. Instead, their bodies shifted subtly, almost instinctively, to a shared closeness on the couch nearby. Their legs nearly touched as they sank into the cushions, shoulders grazing lightly in the aftermath of the minor scare. In the silence that followed, the hum of the fixed machine returned, steady and dependable, but the air between us had changed. Every glance felt heavier, charged with a tension that hadn't been there before. I realized how acutely I noticed the subtle details. The older sister's eyelashes catching the light as she blinked, the slight tilt of the younger sister's head, the way their hair fell across their shoulders in gentle waves. Their proximity was magnetic, and I was caught somewhere in the middle, both observer and participant. I straightened, wiping sweat from my brow, aware of the unspoken electricity in the room. Each small movement, the brushing of knees, the leaning in for conversation, the faint, deliberate touches, had layered the space with an intimacy I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, quiet but pervasive, a slow, simmering warmth that made the kitchen feel smaller, more charged, more alive. As the moment lingered, I realized the washing machine had become almost irrelevant. What mattered now was the unspoken connection threading us together, delicate and tentative, like a string pulled taut between three hearts. And in that suspended silence, I understood, nothing about this ordinary repair job would ever feel ordinary again. With the washing machine finally humming steadily, the immediate tension of the repair began to dissolve, leaving behind a quiet, almost fragile intimacy. I stood back and wiped my hands on a rag, trying to convince myself that the workday was over, but the sisters didn't move to usher me out. Instead, they lingered, their eyes meeting mine with something unspoken, a mutual reluctance to let the moment end. The older sister sat gracefully at the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap, shoulders relaxed but inviting. She spoke first, her voice soft but steady, recounting an anecdote from her childhood, a story about her mother's old apartment, the leaky faucet, the way she learned to fix small things with her own hands. Her laughter was gentle, slightly wistful, and I felt the warmth of her presence wrap around me like a quiet embrace. The younger sister, still perched on the stool, leaned in, her elbow brushing the older sister's arm. There was an easy, natural closeness between them that was palpable, and yet it wasn't exclusionary. Her eyes flicked to me, bright and teasing, as she added her own memories of mishaps with laundry, misbehaving machines, and lessons learned with patience and humor. Each story revealed fragments of their personalities, confidence, wit, vulnerability, and I felt like a quiet witness, honored to share in these glimpses of their lives. As the conversation deepened, the room itself seemed to shrink around us. The warm glow of the afternoon sun softened into gentle amber, dust motes floating lazily in the air, catching the light like tiny sparks. The soft hum of the now functioning washing machine was steady, a quiet backdrop to our shared words and laughter. I realized how acutely I noticed the details, the subtle tilt of the older sister's head when she laughed, the younger sister's hand brushing her hair from her face, the way they leaned slightly toward each other, and in doing so, leaned subtly toward me as well. At one point, the older sister reached for the cup of tea I had offered, and our hands brushed lightly. The contact was fleeting, but in that instant, the warmth lingered, a quiet acknowledgement of proximity and trust. I felt my heart respond, a soft pulse of awareness that this simple gesture carried more weight than it seemed. The younger sister caught my glance and smiled, a knowing, gentle curve of her lips that felt both playful and intimate. The conversation shifted to quieter reflections, regrets, small fears, hopes for the future. I listened, speaking little, but offering presence and understanding. Their openness made me reflective in return, my own thoughts and vulnerabilities quietly surfacing. The intimacy wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a slow-building trust that made the room feel alive with a tension both tender and profound. By the time I stood to stretch, the moment had deepened into a shared, unspoken connection. They weren't just two women I'd come to help, they were companions in an unexpected, delicate bond. And as I glanced between them, catching the subtle warmth in their expressions and the effortless closeness of their gestures, I realized that the most meaningful repair of the day wasn't the machine at all. It was this fragile, beautiful intimacy, the quiet foundation of a connection that promised to linger far beyond the hum of the fixed appliance. The washing machine's steady hum filled the room, but it no longer dominated the atmosphere. Instead, the energy between us had shifted, subtle yet undeniable. I had expected to leave soon after finishing the repair, but both sisters lingered, a silent invitation in the way they moved, the way their eyes met mine. The older sister remained seated on the couch, her posture relaxed but open. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the window, brushing her hair in a warm halo that made the strands shimmer golden. She reached for a small cushion, adjusting it behind her back, and I noticed the gentle curve of her neck as she tilted her head toward me while speaking. Her voice was calm, patient, almost intimate, drawing me closer without words. The younger sister, still brimming with playful energy, had moved closer to the couch, settling beside her sister, knees brushing lightly. She held a mug of tea, steam curling upward, carrying the rich, earthy aroma into the space between us. When our eyes met, she smiled softly, a knowing, teasing glint that felt loaded with shared awareness. Her proximity was deliberate yet unassuming, and I felt the subtle pull of being included in this quiet, intimate orbit. They offered me a cup of tea, and I accepted, lingering near the edge of the couch. Hands brushed against mine as I took the mug, sending a jolt through me, warm, electric, fleeting. The contact was simple, ordinary, yet charged with something unspoken, a delicate tension that held in the space between us. I felt acutely aware of their presence, the way their bodies leaned in, the small shifts that drew us closer without demanding acknowledgement. Conversation continued, soft and meandering, punctuated by laughter and reflective pauses. I noticed how the older sister's shoulder occasionally touched mine when she leaned forward to speak, a subtle, grounding gesture. The younger sister's hair occasionally brushed my arm as she adjusted her position, and each touch, each accidental brush, lingered longer in my awareness than it should. The room felt charged with a gentle electricity, a slow-burning warmth that wrapped around us like a soft blanket. Time seemed to stretch, measured by the quiet clinking of mugs, the hum of the machine, and the cadence of our voices. I caught the older sister's eyes in a glance, her gaze steady, warm, and quietly magnetic. The younger sister's smile lingered, teasing and intimate at once, as if acknowledging that we were all aware of the tension threading through the room. In that moment, I realized that leaving would be harder than I had imagined. The ordinary task of repairing a washing machine had dissolved into something profoundly personal, a shared presence, charged with subtle desire and emotional intimacy. My awareness of them, of their warmth, their small gestures, the gentle brush of skin, was overwhelming yet comforting. As the shadows lengthened and evening approached, we settled into a quiet rhythm, tea in hand, shoulders close, laughter softened to murmurs. The world outside the kitchen seemed to fade, leaving just the three of us suspended in this intimate, delicate space. I understood then, with a quiet certainty, that these moments, the subtle touches, the lingering glances, the warmth of their presence, were what I would carry with me long after I left. The pull between us was undeniable, and yet it was slow, careful, deliberate, the perfect tension of a connection I wasn't ready to name, but could feel in every heartbeat. Evening had settled over the house, the golden sunlight giving way to a soft, amber glow from the lamps scattered around the living room. The washing machine now hummed quietly in the corner, a gentle, comforting background note to the intimacy that had been building all afternoon. The task that had brought me here, the repair, was complete, yet none of us seemed ready to leave the quiet cocoon of the kitchen-turned-living space. The older sister leaned back on the couch, her posture relaxed, a serene warmth radiating from her. She traced the rim of her teacup absent-mindedly, fingers brushing the delicate porcelain, and for a moment, I caught the way her wrist flexed naturally, the soft glow of lamplight highlighting the gentle curve of her neck and collarbone. Her gaze met mine, steady and quietly magnetic, inviting but not pressing, as though acknowledging the connection that had been building in small, unspoken ways all day. The younger sister, perched on the arm of the couch, leaned slightly into her sister's side, their closeness effortless and natural. She offered me a small, teasing smile, her hand brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The warmth of her presence, light, playful, yet intimate, pressed softly against my awareness. When I handed her the last cookie from the plate, our fingers met briefly, lingering just enough to send a subtle jolt through me, a reminder of the quiet tension that had been threading through the day. Conversation had dwindled to soft murmurs and comfortable pauses. The silence wasn't empty, it was filled with awareness, with the subtle acknowledgement of proximity and shared presence. Their shoulders brushed lightly as they shifted, and I realized I was acutely conscious of every small gesture, the way one sister's knee nudged the other's, the gentle tilt of their heads toward me when they spoke, the soft rhythm of their breathing that seemed to sync, almost imperceptibly, with mine. At one point, the older sister rested her hand lightly on the arm of the couch, near mine. I didn't move away. Instead, I allowed the warmth to settle, the simple touch carrying the weight of unspoken affection and mutual trust. The younger sister's eyes caught mine, her expression soft and knowing, as if she recognized the delicate web of connection between all three of us. A shared glance passed silently, conveying more than words could, the intimacy of presence, of hearts quietly acknowledging each other. The room felt suspended, a small world apart from the outside. The air was scented faintly with tea and lavender, the lamplight casting warm shadows across walls and faces, and I felt a deep sense of contentment wash over me. No words were necessary to define the bond that had formed. We sat together, shoulders nearly touching, hands occasionally brushing, laughter and quiet smiles filling the space with a gentle, unhurried rhythm. In that quiet, glowing moment, I realized that leaving was no longer a matter of repairing a machine or finishing a task. It was about holding on to this connection, this delicate intimacy that had been woven through shared presence, subtle touches, and honest conversation. The day's work had transformed into something far more meaningful, a slow, deliberate closeness that promised warmth, affection, and emotional fulfillment. As I leaned back, letting the moment settle around us like a soft blanket, I felt a quiet certainty. The pull between us was subtle, respectful, but undeniable. And in that suspended, tender stillness, I knew that this connection, with both sisters, with their laughter, their warmth, and their shared grace, was exactly where I was meant to be, if only for a little while longer. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and in that extraordinary moment, all three of us were quietly, beautifully together. If you felt the slow-burn tension and heartwarming connection in today's story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more age-gap romance and subtle love stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which moment between the sisters and the narrator resonated with you the most? And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story that touches the heart.